Now take the wheel off, use a 17mm socket. Take these lug bolts off. When you go to take the last one off, just support the wheel in case it's going to fall. Then take the wheel off. Now take some needle nose pliers. We're going to take this pad sensor out. Just grab the base of the sensor and just carefully pull. Trying to see it. There we go. Pulled it out. And slide this right off the bleeder screw where the cap is. You can just pop that off. And slide that pad sensor off. Now take this clip off. Just use a pry bar. You can use some pliers to get underneath here. Just grab it, slide it off. Now I'm just going to take a pry bar and just compress the caliper a little bit, just in between the rotor and the caliper, and just try to compress it so it's a little bit loose. Now we can take these slides off. Just a couple of caps over the slides right here. Just pop those off with a screwdriver. Then you can get to the caliper slide bolts. Now I'm going to use a 7mm hex socket. Take these bolts out. Take those pins out. You can grab the caliper and you should be able to slide it off. If not, you can use a pry bar. Just pry right here. Pry it out. And then take a brake caliper hanger. Take the brake caliper hanger and we'll hang that from the coil spring. Just make sure there's no tension on the brake hose. Now I can take the brake pads off. These ones are stuck on there pretty good. Just pry those off. And take this one off the caliper. There's just a clip that holds into the piston. Now use a 16mm socket, take these two bolts out. And take the bracket off. Using a 6mm hex socket, we're going to take this screw out right here. Give it a couple taps. Take that out. And grab the rotor. If it seems like it doesn't come off too easy, just take a hammer, give it a tap on those areas. Slide it down. Before we take this axle nut off, just take a chisel or a punch and just try to spread it a little bit. It's just been peened over a little. Just try to spread it back to its natural form. The same on this side. Be good. Use a 36 millimeter 12-point socket. Take this nut off. Now we're going to take this lower strut bolt out. Use a 16 millimeter wrench on the bolt side. On the nut side, use an 18 millimeter socket. Take the nut off. And take that bolt out. Now I'm going to use a punch and push down the knuckle from the strut. There we go. Now using a punch, I'm just going to separate the axle. Or you can take a air hammer and get it out that way. Just push it through. And just slide the axle out. Take this panel off. There's some push pins in the back here. Just use a trim tool, take those out. And those are all 8 millimeters. Then take an 8 millimeter socket, take all these bolts out. And take this shield and slide it down. I'm going to remove this shield, use a 7 millimeter socket, take this bolt out. And there's probably one right there. Take that one out as well. So 16. Use a 16 millimeter socket, take these 4 bolts out. And slide this shield down. Before we pop the axle out, I just put a bungee cord around the axle just to prevent it from falling once we pop it out. Now on the axle, I'm just going to use a punch, and there's a little ear right there that you can get to on the back. If you have a fork that fits in between there, you can use a fork. It's pretty tight. just give it a tap. Actually, this is part of the lip right there, so you can't use the fork there. And that'll pop out. And it slides right out. And there it is. I just put a little bit of grease on the end. That's just going to hold the snap ring in there a little bit easier. It's going to make installing it a little easier. And slide it the same way it came out. And just try to push it in. If you have to, you can use a rubber mallet. Just give it a few taps. Just make sure the splines are in. Should go all the way down. Then we're going to slide it into the back of the knuckle. Twist and get that all to line up. With that started, then you want to get it lined up at the base of the strut. And there's 2 pins on there. You want to make sure those line up with the slot in the knuckle. So you might have to twist it a little bit. And use either a pull jack or a screw jack underneath and just raise up on the knuckle. And slide that up till the strut bottoms out. Good. And take the bolt, get the bolt started. Put the nut on. And tighten that down. Now we're going to torque this nut and bolt to 74 foot-pounds. Now install the spindle nut. I'm going to take 2 of the lug studs and get those started. Then we're going to take a pry bar and just put it in between here. Oops. Just like that. That's going to prevent the hub from spinning. Now I'm going to torque this nut to 310 foot-pounds. Just be careful, it's very tight. There we go. Now I'm going to clean up the hub area. You can use a wire brush or a die grinder. Just be careful, don't take off too much material. Take a thin coat of anti-seize and just put it on the hub surface. That's good. Slide the rotor on the hub. Make sure you line that hole up with the threaded hole. And take the screw, get that started. And we'll snug that down. Not too tight, just snug. That's good. Now slide this over the brake rotor. Get the bolt started. All right, I'll tighten those down. Now I'm going to torque these bolts to 81 foot-pounds. I'm going to take the caliper off the hanger, flip it around. We're going to compress that piston. Just use a compressing tool. Just go nice and slow. And compress the piston. As you're pushing this back, fluid's going through the lines, through the hoses, back up into the master cylinder reservoir. All right, it's compressed all the way. Take the tool off. Take the brake pad, we'll slide that into the piston. This one has the bracket on it. Just like that. The other brake pad's just going to go right here. I'll reinstall the caliper. Take the pins and just clean these off with a little brake parts cleaner. Wipe it off with a rag. Now just take the pins, just put a little caliper grease on those. Nice thin coat. And install those in the caliper. And tighten these down. And torque these down to 22 foot-pounds. And put these caps on. And there should be one that goes there as well. Now take this bracket, line this up here. You can use some pliers if you need to. And just push it back in place. It should clip in right there and just be holding right there. Now take the end of the pad sensor and we're going to slide that into the pad. And you can see where it's raised up a little bit. That's going to go towards the pad. Just slide that in. You can use needle nose pliers. With that locked in, we can go over the bleeder screw, just like that, and then put that cover over. Slide this plate back in place. Get the bolts started. And some of the smaller screws, put those in as well before you tighten those up. Should be one right here as well. Tighten those down. All right, now slide this cover in place. Same way it came out. Line these up. And get the bolts started. Oh, there's push pins that go in there. And the push pins, put those in first. Get those, and then tighten down all the rest of the bolts. Take the tire, line it up. Put the lug nuts on. Lug bolts. Get those all started. Now I'm going to torque these lug bolts to 110 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. Now just go around again, double check.